Scott Perriman, Joel Payne, Eric Cordelesa, and Mark Bednar are back with me. Secretary Mullen, I mean, that was a pretty public blow when the president called an audible on what we assumed his department was doing. I mean, is this display of loyalty now a coincidence? Is there really daylight, you think?
No, I don't think so. President Trump loves Markwayne Mullen. That's why he called him and said, I know you have a safe spot in the Senate, but come up here, help clean us up, help us clean up DHS and fulfill our campaign promise here to, enact our deportation priorities. So I think that he is doing a really good job. Obviously, moments like this, incidents with ICE like this, I look back to Minnesota, right? Mm-hmm. So on the heels of what was basically a 90-10 issue, all the fraud that was being uncovered, it even kept Tim Walz from running for re-election. And then what disappears from the headlines the next day? That very issue, because of all the incidents with ICE in Minnesota. So,
wait, what are you implying? That he somehow
that when these incidents occur, and tragic and unfortunate as they are, this is something that obviously needs to be cleaned up. And if there's foul play, that needs to be looked at. But at no point should that distract from the fact that their fulfillment of the deportation priorities of the president, that's going to continue. If there's edges around the corner, to deal with, to smooth around. Mm-hmm. Especially with these incidents in Texas and Maine, very unfortunate, but they're very clear-eyed about what they need to do here.
In America, law enforcement should not be meeting routine stops with deadly force. These are unnecessary escalations. These are irresponsible actions by officers that don't seem to be trained. These are people who are recruited to be thugs on the street, and they're acting like thugs. And I actually care less about Donald Trump and Markwayne Mullen having daylight between them. I mean, that's great. Donald Trump will throw anybody under the bus. He'll throw a family member under the bus. What I'm more concerned about is that it is dangerous for people to exist in their own communities. In suburban Maine, what is the immigration emergency that's being addressed that required someone to be met with deadly force there? Can someone explain that to me? Can any Republican explain that to me? Will any Republican put themselves behind that? That's what Donald Trump stands for. That's what Markwayne Mullen stands for. That's what every Republican on the ballot this fall is going to have to explain to their voters. And it's a shame.
Is going to have to address. I mean, she had to address it, and Maine, obviously, a particularly hotbed issue for a number of reasons. But it's also representative. You mentioned Minnesota. It's representative of every state in the country where there is an ICE presence, that there is the prospect. Obviously, in Maine, as just one, this was somebody who had the legal working rights here in the United States as well. People are concerned about this, and I wonder how this will impact Republicans on races, looking at not just Maine and Texas, but all across the country.
Well, it's going to have a huge impact. I mean, one thing this really reveals, this flare-up between Secretary Mullen and President Trump, is there is a divide within the administration. There's a tug of war between those who want a hardline, draconian immigration policy to really ramp up this deportation operation, and others who think that the just constant rove of negative headlines that emerged from these aggressive tactics early last year and in Minnesota earlier this year were terrible for the administration. There was an effort to get the president to pull back last January and February as things were going out of control in Minneapolis. And so this is the primary debate that's happening inside the White House and President Trump's orbit, which is there are those who think we need to activate the base in order to boost turnout among our voters in this election so they don't sit it out. And there's also the other camp that fears that we're going to alienate the independent voters and this broad coalition that swept us to power in 2024, and they will end up handing Democrats power because they don't like the fact that their communities are being terrorized by these ICE agents.
And I just want to say, these are not immigration priorities. This has crossed a line, and it crossed a line a long time ago. You have the president that in March of last year removed people from the country without any due process at all against the order of a federal judge. Then you have American citizens, people also with the legal right to be here, being met with deadly force, in addition to others being met with deadly force when there's no justification for it. Every poll after poll is saying that the vast majority of Americans believe that this president has gone too far. Immigration issues in this country, that was a winning issue for the president at one point, but this has crossed over in so many ways over the past year and a half that you are dealing with these untrained thugs. It is not normal. We shouldn't normalize it. It's not just an unfortunate situation that people are being killed at the hands of the federal government, and that, frankly, I mean, Senate Republicans, every single one of them voted to fund ICE without any additional layers of accountability.
I want you to answer that point, but I want to get to the viewer questions as well, who are eager to join the conversation. Chris from Philadelphia asks, what is the Democratic Party doing to earn my vote instead of just being the anti-Trump party? How are they planning to make our lives better? You want to take it?
I think that is a very good challenge to lay down for anybody who wants to vote, particularly the Democratic Party. I think every Democrat I talk to has long since understood the fact that being anti-Trump is not enough in this environment. And I heard your conversation with Governor Polis, and I think we could spend more time on the intra-party conversation that's happening within the Democratic Party.
Yes, please.
But I actually think that what Democrats understand in this environment is that you are no longer in a place where you can just say a noun, a verb, in Donald Trump. You actually have to have a policy that speaks to people's experience and speaks to how you're going to make it better. My only point I was going to make, Laura, was what happened to that man in Maine was killed in front of his child, pulled out of the car and handcuffed, and bled out on the street. What is the defense for that? What is the defense for that? Is there any? It's disgusting. Anti-American.
I want to go to Amy from North Carolina. She asked this question: was the president pressuring Brad Raffensperger for 11,780 votes in Georgia not election interference? And if it wasn't, what is election interference? Who wants to take it?
I mean, I think it's clear this is not a normal situation. We've never seen the president of the United States, of any political party, seek to engage in this type of back and forth, of this type of misinformation around election integrity. The documents that the president referenced last night, by the way, they actually prove the other point. The only threat to election integrity in this country has been from the president's allies, people like Vladimir Putin, trying to manipulate elections to serve the actual president's interests. So I think that there is a range of definitions of election interference, but what we are seeing right now is active attempts to normalize election interference.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'll leave some of the questions on the table, but we'll answer them. Don't worry. Up next on this